This is the World Satsanga on the 4th of May 2013. For those devotees, pure souls and attendees who can't make the actual physical World Satsanga, if you're joining us via the recording, you also enter the event space associated with it. So, in essence, you also enter into the synchronicity as well, and therefore add to the work that we are doing. For that, I thank you. So, Itzo should have been with us, but he may well dial in later, which is no problem at all. But I'm just going to go through the agenda. We've had Skype stabilise, and I've put a little lead-in at the front for those people who join us later, because I know the guys in Hong Kong and China follow it via the recording, and they've indicated that they do feel as if, and well, certainly Marita does, feels as if she's part of the group and the meditation whilst she's going through the recording later, which is exactly what she is doing, because once people are committed to going through the recording and participating in the meditation afterwards, one thing is very, very clear, is that person enters into the event space associated with where we are and actually augments through synergy the work that we do. So although right now there's just the four of us on the line, when the guys over in Hong Kong and everybody else who wants to join in through the recording does so, it actually augments what we're doing now rather than in a future timeline, which is wonderful for us. So we would have welcomed Itzo. Itzo clearly may well join us later. He may well have got the time wrong. It doesn't matter. And Renata's also potentially wants to join us, but she's again in Hong Kong, so she'll probably take part in the Eastern Hemisphere version. So the rest of the agenda is to talk about backfill people, basically who they are, what they are, and how to recognise them, and then how to love your enemy. And then I want to go through some questions and answers based upon those. Now we can integrate that within the talk, or we can add to it questions and answers towards the end. It's immaterial to me which way we go for it. And then I want to repeat as close as I can do the meditation that we did on the 30th of March, which is to raise the frequency of, well, it was initially Syria and then Northern Korea, but we packaged Syria into the Middle East and Northern Korea and then joined them together to create an area where we could target for increasing their frequencies and therefore stop them from entering into a downward spiral energetically and frequentially. Now it's interesting to note that since we did the work in March, there's been very little news about Northern Korea or even Syria from the UK perspective. So it'd be interesting to find out whether anybody else has had any news from the various different broadcasting companies at all. Has anybody had any updated information from Syria or from?
Sorry, I never watched the news. Watched TV at all.
That's very wise, Chris. Very wise. Marnie, have you heard anything from your side in the States about Syria or Northern Korea at all since we did the work on?
North Korea has been dormant, but we've been hearing lots about Syria, and I do listen to NPR, but don't on a television. So I filter and I listen to a lot of BBC, but the NPR version stream is talking about the weapons, biological chemical weapons used on the Syrian people. So they have evidence. The United States has now confirmed that they have used them on their own people.
Right.
So there's and now the United States is in this sort of position where they're not sure what we want to do to go forward. So, sorry, the cat's meowing.
Okay, that's okay. I have two cats here as well, so you're perfectly limited to have cats. But I was wondering whether my cats actually, because sometimes they go outside and decide they want to be ushered inside rather than find the cat flap. Slight diversion. But in terms of activity from Syria, has there actually been any activity, or is it just reporting that's been augmented?
It's just reporting that's been augmented. Activity seems to be slowing.
Okay. So it seems that and one would never be able to really prove this, but since we've done the work, there's been a slowing down of actual activity within the locations of Syria and northern Korea. So if we basically do exactly the same meditation again, we should be able to help and reduce that activity further, which would be great. And then I think, based upon that, I think we can carry on. Now, backfill people. I don't know if any of you have heard me explain backfill people, but backfill people are, in essence, a completely different energy set from those energies that are energetic mankind incarnating to experience, learn and evolve in the physical universe. They are a different energy set because when the source entity created the multiverse and then created those entities, which are ourselves, to populate the multiverse and experience, learn and evolve by getting into the minute detail of that which is part of the multiverse, and then progressing ourselves and passing the evolutionary content back whilst maintaining it ourselves to our source entity. We have a critical mass of individuals doing it. Now, throughout the multiverse, there are various different levels of entity that were created. In essence, when the source entity created us all, it, to use the English term, took its eye off the ball. It created, but didn't ensure that the level of energetic content was consistent throughout that which it created. So as a result of that, we have a number of different spiritual entity types. Some of those can only incarnate as animals, some of those can only incarnate as minerals or vegetable types. But they can still progress in time, and they can jump to a different genre of entity, provided they put enough work into it. Those other entities that are a higher level of evolution, such as ourselves, although we can go down and incarnate as an animal, for instance, it's of no benefit to us at all. So we tend to stay where we are and progress forwards from that perspective. But there are entities in between the animal and those other entities that you could classify very globally as incarnate mankind. I mean, incarnate mankind is one word, but there's other entities that are of the same evolutionary content that are within or without the multiverse, and lots of them progress without the need to incarnate into the lower frequencies that we classify as the physical universe. So from that perspective, they're there, but we don't see them very often, specifically when we incarnate. Now, as we are progressing, as we are increasing our evolutionary content, there are those who ascend before us. And they ascend before us for a number of different reasons. One is the number of incarnations they've done. Two is how they've managed to accrue their evolutionary content. And three is because they've simply decided not to incarnate again to assist their evolution whilst in the working for the source to be part of the source's work on evolutionary, basically, in the employment of the source for that reason. So when we incarnate, we must have a certain critical mass to allow us to incarnate. And certainly, using the Earth as an example, we are losing people to the higher frequencies every day. Some of those are ascending naturally through the evolutionary process. Some of those are ascending after the demise of the physical body. Irrespective of how they're doing it, they're moving onwards, and they're deciding, based upon what they've accrued so far, from an evolutionary perspective, they don't need to come back. So we are now starting to lose individuals who are prepared to incarnate. Certainly the word's got out, there's hard work here, and it's getting harder. And one of the things I noted 2 or 3 days ago when I was working on thinking about the newsletter that I send out or broadcast once a month, was that 18 months ago, time, 24-hour day was speeding up. So our time was speeding up. So a 24-hour day was actually only 19 hours of old time. At the Transformation Conference last year, 24-hour day equaled about 17 days of old time, according to a number of individuals there. And when I was writing this information, or starting to write the information down for the newsletter, I noticed when I logged into it, and that's the source, he said it was 15 hours of old time there equals a 24-hour day, which is very interesting, because since I've personally finished the day job and started to focus totally on this work, I've wondered how I managed to do both at the same time, because the time is definitely getting shorter, and therefore that is a superb indicator that we are rising to the frequencies. Now, to assist in those who are still here, still incarnate, and still will incarnate in various different lives to come, to make sure that they can still progress onwards, there still needs to be a critical mass. So what's happened is that there's a lesser entity, and I don't mean it in a derogatory sense, an entity who is of a lesser energy content has been allowed to incarnate in the physical, to fill the gaps, as it were, to backfill those entities who've progressed onwards, so those who are still here can also progress and then get themselves into the position where they don't need to incarnate anymore. As a payoff, they've been allowed to incarnate, and they will also progress in an accelerated way, as we do whilst incarnate. And they'll be able to feed that back to their own energetic soul groups once they've become disincarnate. So they will also augment their own evolutionary acceleration as a result of being part of something which is really of being of service to make sure that everybody else can, from this particular energetic genre perspective, that is what I will call energetic mankind perspective. So they're helping us out to make sure that we can clear all of our decks of those individuals who need to progress to the point of non-incarnation. And in doing so, they also progress themselves personally and collectively as well. However, when they incarnate, they don't portray the same level of interactive qualities as we do. Even in our worst case scenario, they are different as well. And you can tell who they are and how to recognise them. They are individuals who are easily attracted to low frequency stimuli, whether it's argument, whether it's materialism, whether it's sex, whether it's addiction to alcohol or betting, or gambling, for instance, or foods of some sort, or just that they are incapable of being educated properly because of their own individual personalities. You can tell them a mile away. You can just walk up around people and you can spot whether they're backfill people. Last year with Alan Marsh, we did some touring around the countryside with Alan, myself and Anne, and we went through a different area where there was some work being done on the road. And we went past a group of individuals working on the road, and all of a sudden I said, "Alan, that person over there, the backfill person." And he said, "How do you know?" So I can just tell. I can tell by the way his posture is, by the way he's handling himself, by the way he's interacting with the others, by the way he's working, by the way he's committed to doing that which is of service. Yeah, it was a completely different energy set to the other guys who were working on the road, and he was surprised at that. And then I said to him, "Well, when we go somewhere else, I'll let you so you can find out whether you can actually spot somebody." And actually, we forgot to do it, but in essence, he took on board that there was an opportunity to actually identify that there are other entities out there who are incarnating in our space, but they're there to help us out, and they are of a completely different genre of entity. Has anybody noticed individuals who you would classify as being not specifically human from that perspective, but they are in between the animal, as it were? And there's nothing wrong with being animals, because they've got their own energy set and they're also progressing and ourselves. Has anybody spotted that and wondered, some individuals and just wondered what they are?
Yeah, I have a few times, Guy.
Yeah. Do you want to give us an example, Chris?
Well, where I live, it's a very small town. I know every face in it, And sometimes faces appear, where I am at, in McDonald's sitting outside, There was a man there last week, 2 weeks ago. There's an old guy with a beard, a white beard, and he was sitting there with funny. He just didn't suit the fashion, But he was just sitting there, and he was in McDonald's, and he didn't eat nothing, And the second time I seen him, he was up at the counter asking for milk. Filled at McDonald's, or milk in McDonald's. So he just sat back down again outside the table, and he was a big beard, and so I thought, I'll go and get him. I got him a glass of milk at the shop across the street where they sell milk, So I brought him over the milk. He said, "There's some milk for you. How did you didn't get it in McDonald's?" And he didn't say nothing. He just gave me a funny look and looked away,
Yeah.
I think it was just strange, that's all. It just seemed strange. That's all.
Yeah, they think they're owed a living, for instance. They think that the world or the universe owes them for what they are. That's a good way of saying it. Marnie, have you seen anybody, or do you recognise anybody who you would believe would be classified as a backfill person?
I'm not sure, and I guess let me ask you a question about this, because you had said that they're here to help us, but at the same time in your description of them, it sounds like people that engage in, are stuck with addictions, are engaging in argumentative interactions. That doesn't seem very helpful. And so how are they here to help us? And are you talking about people that are, I don't know, I feel like my brother's one of these people when you describe it like this, that they can't see the higher purpose in things, they can't see the connectivity in things, they can't see to help themselves, that you're helping them and they attack you. And so I'm just curious how this kind of people can be helpful to the rest of the planet trying to ascend.
Well, I have a similar sibling who could also be, I'm thinking if he's not, he's very close. I don't think he is, but he's very close on being at that level. In essence, they are there to fill the gap. They're there to provide the mass, if you like, balance the scales between that which is required to enable those who are still progressing to enable them to progress and ascend, whereas those who would need to be there if everybody was ascending at the same time. So, irrespective of what they do and how they do it, it's their being there that counts. Their being part of the incarnate weight, if you want to call it that, within the scales, to make sure that everything's in balance, so that those who are still here, but are of the right level of quality, but just a bit slower, there's nothing wrong with being slower, they're also able to, in their own way, ascend to the point where they don't need to incarnate. And this is, or other various different levels of energetic existence. So it doesn't matter what they are, what they do, it's the mere fact that they're here that counts. They're providing this level of extra critical mass of sentience whilst incarnate. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I guess my next question would be then, or my comment, I guess, would be that I think that the world is full of people, what it sounds like to me, that aren't thinking, that aren't engaged, that aren't, and so how do you distinguish that from being, sucked into the, latest and greatest and what the societal things are, and like Chris doesn't own a television, doesn't watch the news, so doesn't get engaged in that drama. That's the mainstream number of people on the planet. So how do you?
Yeah, there's
sounds like you're describing a lot of people.
Yeah, we have to remember as well. There's a lot of people who are incarnate who have elected to not be awake or can't possibly be awake because of their own evolutionary content, but they can nevertheless progress irrespective of that condition. So they will appear to be asleep and just doing stuff. But the difference between those individuals and these other individuals is marked. One can tell energetically that they're different, and that they are not quite of this earth, as it were. Right now, I'm looking at, as I'm saying this, I keep getting images of percentages, and there's around 70% of us who are of the right energetic genre, and between 30% rising to 40% of those individuals who are of the backfill people genre. So things are changing, and the number of individuals who are ascending is increasing, and the number of those who are being pulled into balance the scales is also increasing. Now, for those of us who are awake, what does that mean? Because we're still here. There's all these other people ascending around us. There's people filling the gaps and plugging the hole and being backfill people to sort of make sure that other people can ascend. But what about us? Well, in essence, we're here to make sure that the energies are elevated still. Those light workers, those individuals who are aware awake or who are helping in some way by being of service, are really here to create stability. So we're here to help, to teach, and to obviously learn as well at some point, but we're here to maintain the stability and to teach those who want teaching, to those who start to become aware and awake and start to want to understand the greater reality. So we shouldn't be concerned about the fact that we're still here. We shouldn't be worried about the fact there's others supposedly who are less, I'll use the word, advanced than ourselves, or lesser evolutionary content than ourselves, who are also moving on, because they've decided to do that. They've not elected to stay behind and be of service to those who are still here, and that's why we're here. We're here to, if you like, wash the sleep out of the eyes who are still asleep, so that can help them to come to move up the frequencies as well. Okay, Matthias, have you had any examples of these individuals?
Well, I cannot say, but the things that I experienced lately is there are two types of people. One starting to awaken, and the other type is going the other way, like the pool of material world, like you said, is going stronger. So on one hand, I see people progressing, and on the other side, more and more people is just more sleeping, and I don't know, they are just going the other way. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and that's a good indication of how the balance is in terms of the number of backfill people is increasing. As we become more awake and aware, we start to notice those that aren't awake and aware, and we start to notice how many of them there are. And really, I've just been given a percentage, there are only circa 10% of individuals who are anywhere near awake and aware, whilst we are incarnate right now. So we will start to become more, what's the word for it? I was going to say observational. We will notice more individuals who aren't aware and awake, who are just doing life and not really engaging in their own personal progression. Although some people don't need to. Their job is to be here just to do what they're doing for a few years, as it were. Whereas others are here to provide stability and not actually do anything spiritually. They're just to provide the high frequency stability. So, and sometimes it's not appropriate for those individuals to become aware and awake. That's not their role. They're here to provide buoyancy or flotation or continued existence for those frequencies that are currently here right now. And some of those individuals only become activated when certain frequential levels have been achieved. So a lot of it's done on automatic. But there's a definite difference between those individuals and these backfill people, and you really can spot it a mile away. But I'll tell you what, I had a really interesting personal experience a week ago. I held a workshop in Cardiff, which is in Wales, in the UK, And on the last day, we went to go and see Kevin Moore, who's sort of reinventing himself and trying to become more global in his broadcasting. And Kevin Moore does an alternative late night talk show that does both audio and video based, and he's trying to get the same level of franchise as Coast to Coast has got. In fact, I think he's working with Coast to Coast. But he has got a studio that's based in Cardiff, and it's a nice place. It's just kicked off. It's different to where he was before, but he's doing it on his own rather than doing it for an existing studio that somebody else has paid for. So he's doing it on his own, and I know he's going to be very, very successful, extremely influential later in his existence. When I walked in, and there was a guy doing a radio show, and it was all rap-based music, and it was extremely what I would call low grade. But this guy was really enjoying himself, and he was really engaging with the music, and he was really engaging with the potential listeners out there. And as we walked in, he said, "Oh, Kevin Moore's here now, and there's his guests." And he said, "Oh, Kevin Moore's on at 11:40, and we're going to have a great time. Please tune in." Blah blah blah. So he was really quite open to promoting others around him. And I got a cup of coffee and came downstairs and waved at him, and he waved back, and he promoted the show again. And after he'd finished, I had a chat with him, and it was interesting that even though this guy was clearly a Backfill person in every way, shape and form, there was tattoos around his neck, and he was wearing a very grunge type of attire, and he was very sort of his demeanour was very sort of not unintelligent, but very, very sort of materialistically selfishly himself. I really suddenly felt immense love for this guy, and I thought, wow, where's that coming from? And it was because even though he's a Backfill person, in everything that I've detected, he's still part of the source, and therefore he's still part of us. And I was immensely joyful at the fact that I met this guy and talked to him as a fellow individualised unit of the source, and it was an immense feeling of joy that surprised me, and that I embraced with equal amounts of joy. And what I actually picked up was that this guy's actually going to get a major break at some point, and he's going to do very, very well for himself as a DJ. But the thing is, irrespective of whether these people are Backfill people and they're going to be, and they're just there to help out with maintaining the balance, the critical mass, they're still part of what we are at the end of the day. They're still part of the source, and as we are part of the source. And therefore we should still love them and hold them in high regard and do what we can for them while we can. So irrespective of whether we think that they're causing the next world war, whether they're terrorists or whether they're just bums on the street begging for money, really they're still us at the end of the day. So we need to be able to help them when we can. But we need to recognise them for what they are, and that's the most important thing. Which is interesting lead into the next subject, which is ways to love your enemy. Because what is an enemy at the end of the day, in true form? Is it just somebody we're fighting against, or is it somebody who talks against us, and therefore is really not on our path? They're saying everything they can, or they're doing everything they can to stop us from moving down our path, either on a personal basis, or on a country-based basis, or a city-based basis, or a civilization-based basis. An enemy is somebody that we perceive as being somebody who is against us, somebody who is not going to help us, somebody who is holds us in abhorrence of that which we are in every way, shape and form. But when we look at it from the perspective of the bigger picture, and we stand back and we realise that from the point of view of the source entity, not going back past to the origin, but let's leave it the source entity right now, our God. everything that was created to work within the multiverse, to experience, learn and evolve, and progress subsequently, within all of the depth of lower frequencies that are here, and all the different experiences we can experience as a result of that, that which we call our enemy is also doing exactly the same thing. And although we call them our enemy because they may be holding us in low regard or saying things about us in public that are reducing our standing with certain people, if we look at it the other way around, they hold us as our enemy as well, and that we may say something about them which talks them down in public and gives them a lesser standing or credibility in public. And when we look out even further, if we're both doing that, then why are we doing that? Are we doing it to try and maintain our own energy levels, to try and show that we're bigger than somebody else? And actually, we know bigger than anybody else, really. We're just the same individual. So if we look at working even further back and say, okay, that which is our enemy is actually an incarnate individual, and that incarnate individual is actually an energy set, and that energy set is you know, of the same qualities as our incarnate energetic quality. So you could classify them as incarnate mankind for ease of speaking. And then you work back and say, well, actually, incarnate mankind was created by the Source as a result of separating its own energies off to allow us to experience, or should I say, to allow it to experience through us the minute detail of this multiverse, so that it can progress and pass on the evolutionary content to the origin, and as a result of that, we also do so. Then that which is our enemy is actually just another entity who's incarnating. And if that entity that's incarnating is just also doing its job of experiencing, learning and evolving, albeit in a completely different way to we're doing, then we should also consider that the Source loves it as much as it loves us. Even though we might be doing things that are diametrically opposed in terms of we might be doing things from a wonderfully loving way and being of service in all ways, and this other individual who we classify as our enemy might be entering into all sorts of abusive behaviour, language, and other actions that can cause the demise of physical bodies, etc. And that individual is also looking at adding to the evolutionary content of the Source from a completely opposite perspective, then we see that we're both adding towards making sure that duality doesn't exist within the physical. And so therefore we're both adding to helping augment our own, and through augmenting our own, we augment the Source entity's evolutionary content and its personal progression. So we're all doing the same thing for the same reasons, just in different ways. And if we recognise that, then we see the beauty in what's happening. We see the synergy in what's happening. And when we see the synergy in what's happening, we therefore realise that we're one and the same, we're just working on a different road. And sometimes the road is dirty and sometimes the road is spotlessly clean. And as a result of that, we can say, okay, even though this individual is my enemy, I can love him as much as my brother or my sister, because they are also doing the job that they're incarnate for, which is evolving at the end of the day and progressing onwards. So when we look for ways to love our enemy, the big major way is really to stand back and realise that they are part of the Source still, as we are, and therefore are on an equal footing in terms of their position within the Source, as we are. The Source holds them in no lesser regard than it would hold us. It holds every entity that is created in high regard because of the work that's being done to augment its own evolutionary progression. So we should consider our enemies not as our enemies, but more as a fellow incarnate, doing the best they can with the tools that they've got around them. Some of those tools might be a result of how they've incarnated and the family set and the location they've incarnated into, which means they might be not as well off as we are, financially, relationship-wise, or career-wise, or even from their their house, their abode-wise, or the neighbourhood that they're in. But nevertheless, they're doing a job, and they're doing the work that we wouldn't do. They've decided to incarnate and do really hard work, whereas we're doing it from the easy perspective, we think. So actually, we have to realise that they're doing a harder job than us, and therefore we should respect them for doing a harder job, and therefore love them for doing a harder job, because they're doing that which we chose not to do. Does that make any sense to anybody at all?
Well, I guess I have always more questions. The ultimate questioner here. So a couple of things, I guess. One that strikes me as duality, and that really the enemy perspective is if you lose the perspective of duality, then you won't see those that are challenging to you as an enemy. Although they may see you as an enemy, you won't perceive them as an enemy. And so it's an understanding of, it goes back to perspective of being able to step back into the greater, see the greater picture and design.
Yeah.
How do you, though, help those that are, even though you may not perceive them as an enemy, they're acting as an enemy to you. They are existing in a duality sense. And it's almost that they attack you for helping them. So how can you continue to help those, I would say, evolve and come into a higher frequency that are in that situation? Yeah.
In a passive way. I've experienced a similar thing with a particular individual who I interact with on training. And that particular individual, in my low frequency thought processes, didn't like. But when I stand back and look at what that individual is doing and how they're doing it, and I start to realise that actually they are the source, then it made a change. It made me change my attitude as to how I should relate to this individual. And whereas previously I was very offhanded and very short and abrupt with this person, I now treat them with equal love and adoration as I treat others around this individual. And I tell you what, when you do it and you don't respond to the knocks and the bangs that will happen in the first instances, they do turn around. And I've seen this individual turn around, and rather than hold me in one light, they've held me in a different light now, purely because they can't make me react. And I am working with them as an equal, rather than holding them in a lower light or a higher light. And it's made a massive difference, actually. And it's been an interesting experiment in seeing how one can turn around the interactive content between individuals through being negative interactive content to being positive interactive content, purely by being persistent and robust in what we do in interacting with them. So rather than being worried about whether they continuously deride us in public, we always talk positively about them in public. And eventually it gets back, and eventually they realise actually that there's something positive about this individual, and they will start to change around. And when they start to change around, they start to look at what we do. And when they look at what we do, they start to realise that some of the things that we do are positive or optimal, and they'll start to copy it. So then, at that point, we start to lead by example, and that's the way we should be treating it, taking the opportunity to continuously lead by example, and then eventually those who initially struggled to take on board what we were doing and therefore would reject our help will start to see that they start to accept the help and they start to behave in a more positive way. It takes time though. It's hard work, but it takes time. And it's always successful. I mean, I've seen it 2 or 3 times now. I mean, I've always been really surprised. The individuals I've worked with have always come out to the other side and I've been able to work with them positively, whereas previously it was hard work.
Thank you for that example. That it was actually really inspiring to me on many levels. So, and something I needed to hear. So, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And sometimes you've got to vent your spleen, as it were, and say, you've got to do this, otherwise you'll end up like that. But say it no more than twice, and then leave it at that, and then change, and then work with a new subject that comes along. Because once you've said it and vented, and you've got rid of your sort of urgent energy to say it, then you've done your job. You've broadcast the alternative opportunity that they could take should they decide to go down it, and that would make them a better person. And and then continue to lead by example, and eventually they'll get it at some point. It may not be. They may have a few more hurdles to fall over, but eventually they'll get it. Specifically when they see that because you're walking your own talk, that you come off and do things and are successful in all sorts of different ways that they aren't, and you're successful because you're doing the process that you've tried to illuminate them with, and once they see that, then they start to copy it. They won't give you any credibility for it, but you will see it and therefore take some unegotistical satisfaction eventually.
Well, the ego needs to take a back seat anyway in all of this. The ego is probably what gets us into this problem in the first place.
Yes, I know. Yeah, we're always able to advise those who have done worse than ourselves as to how well we've done ourselves, and therefore we think of ourselves as being better, but actually we're not. We just think we are. And actually we should, everything we do we should lead by example rather than trying to, and that's the best teaching method actually, rather than trying to force it on somebody. Leading by example is the best teaching method, without doubt, and it works the best because it's unaggressive, it's unforceful, and it is intoxicating at times, and people can see what's happened, which is good. Thank you. Anybody else have any comments on that at all? No. Right, well, based upon that then, I think we can move on. If you have any other questions and answers, we can move on to that now, before we move on to repeating the meditation we did last month, which will be a repeat of the increase in the frequency of the Middle East, namely Syria and North Korea, using the same methodology as we did last time. Okay, no comments, good, fine. Okay, so what I'd like us to do in that case then is get ourselves in a comfortable position. Don't forget that although there's only 4 of us right now, which is Matthias, Chris, Marnie and myself, there are going to be quite a few people who join the group in a different event space. So they will join the group and they will also add to the synergy of what we're doing, which is fantastic. I know there's a lot in the Far East will help. We'll be tapping into this tomorrow when they wake up, and it's broadcast onto the website and their emails. So if we get ourselves in our seats, nice and a comfortable but erect manner. If you have a straight back chair, use that. Seats, feet flat on the ground. Small the back in the right angle aspect of the chair, and the back straight uppermost. And we put the tops of our hands and our upper thighs with the palms facing uppermost. And we concentrate our gaze, our closed eye gaze or stare, on the area of our third eye, which is in between the 2 eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. And I want you to imagine that you're walking into, or about to enter, a room, a white room. And in the room, right now, there's a bunch of chairs. And I'm sitting in one of those chairs, and my hands are free. And you grab a chair, and you can either sit to my left or to my right. And with either your right hand or your left hand, you take either my left hand or my right hand, and just sit there and work with the direction that we're going into. Wonderful. So move in on your own time, and I'll just check that you're there. Okay. So the very quick response. All are there, all holding either my left or my right hand, which is fantastic. And those of you who join later in the recording, in either a day's time or a week's time, a month's time or a year's time, you'll also be part of this energy, this event space. So just do exactly as others have done who are here in this particular event space, and take one of my hands, my left hand and my right hand, and then join in with the meditation direction and the energetic direction of what we're doing. So everything will add to the synergy of what we're doing and augment it. So if we slightly zoom out of where we are in this white room and put ourselves in an aeroplane that is slowly climbing from the ground, we're seeing the ground around us disappear from our view and become part of the greater vista of the city that we're part of. And then that city becomes part of the greater vista of the country that we're part of, and that country becomes part of the greater vista of the planet that we're part of. And then we rotate ourselves around to where the Middle East is, where Syria is, the actuality, and where Northern Korea is. And we just observe from an orbital condition, if you want to call it that. So let's just think of where we are now. We're above it, the Earth in an orbital condition. We can see North Korea and Syria, or the Middle East. Let's classify all of the Middle East as Syria, okay? And we're in orbit. If we think that actually we're inside a bigger environment, okay? We're inside a structure. Now we're inside of the structure of the multiverse, but I don't want to particularly focus on the multiverse right now. I want to go into a thought process that negates that and goes above it. So we're in a structure that's within a structure. And that structure is the source entity. And if we think of this as being in orbit around the Earth, and we're seeing these two areas, the Middle East and the North Korea aspect as being there, and then we realise that we're within a larger bubble, and this bubble has an outside surface and an inside surface, rather like a balloon does when you blow it up. There's an outside surface and an inside surface, and that we're within that area that's within all aspects of the inside surface. So we're in the centre of this balloon that's been inflated. So this balloon, if you think about it, is that environment which is the source entity. So let's now imagine that from that inside surface, there's like an umbilical or an energy line, like a typhoon or a water spout, that starts to form from that inside edge and starts to project itself down to where we are. Now, before this continues to come down, if we think of North Korea and the Middle East as being aspects of the Earth, but they're all on the eastern side of the Earth, so if we join them together, because that's what they'd look like now from our perspective in orbit, then they become one singular small sphere on their own, singular small sphere of particular low frequency. So as this typhoon comes down, there's a little ball of energy on the end of that as well, and it starts to co-join with this ball of lower frequency energy, this ball of Middle East and North Korea combined, which also includes the Syrian location. Then this ball moves around it and starts to basically cover the whole area and engulf that whole area. this energy, being the source entity, is permeable, and it permeates all of that ball that was the Middle East and North Korea. It surrounds it and permeates it in all aspects, in all frequencies, in all dimensions, in all subdimensional components. It is within and without everything that is part of that ball, which is the Middle East and North Korea. Because this ball permeates the ball, which is part of the typhoon, this energy vortex that comes down from the inner surface of that outer periphery of the source, that's engulfing this smaller ball of low frequency energy that's called Middle East and North Korea, then there starts to be a level of normalization. So this energy, this North Korea and the Middle East, starts to raise its frequencies as a result of being part of the interface of a higher frequency set. So the frequencies go from that which is below the average of the Earth, because clearly where there is warlike tendencies or aggressive tendencies between peoples, then that is below the normal frequency of the Earth. So this energy set starts to increase. The energy set of the source starts to increase the base frequency of this other sphere as it permeates without and within that sphere. And as these energies increase, if we think of it, that ball, that sphere, in terms of a colour, then we can think of it as being black in its low frequency existence. Then as the frequencies do increase, that blackness starts to change. And it starts to change from a dark grey to a middle grey to a light grey. The colour change indicating the frequential change from darkness to lightness. So as we increase the frequencies, we're there helping the source entity energy engulf and permeate that smaller sphere of Middle East, North Korea. It starts to increase their frequencies. So the colour changes accordingly. It goes from light grey to very light grey, to unperceivable grey, to dirty white, to a creamy white, to a bright white, to a fluorescent white, to an iridescent white, to radiance, to an increasing radiance, to a glowing and pulsating in pure high frequency energy type of appearance. As a result of the interface, pure interface with the source, the Middle East and North Korea is now high energy, much higher than the base frequency of the Earth. In fact, interfacing with the source has made it the highest frequency location on the Earth right now. So as we allow the source entity energy to permeate through the ball of North Korea and Middle East, we allow the base frequency of that area to become that of the source, to become pure. The pulsating iridescent energy increases, becoming normalized, becoming more iridescent, becoming finer and finer, so that eventually we can see that the energy is in its pure state. It's so pure, it is beyond that which is perceivable. It is beyond that of colour. So now it is in its purest state of frequency. So all that was low frequency about the Middle East and North Korea is now shed, and is being shed, like droplets of rain from a cloud falling away, leaving only high frequency air. So all the low frequency intentions and investments and environments are also dropping away, leaving this pure high frequency, non-opaque ball of Middle East and North Korea. There's a totally see-through aspect because of its high frequencies. So although we can perceive it as being there, it is no longer visible. It has gone because it's been changed from black through the different grey, white and iridescent colours, now into invisible colours because it's become so pure we can't see it, and therefore no colour or opacity can describe it from our perspective. The work we have done has raised it significantly. The source entity energy has brought it up to that which is the source in its purest sense. So imagine, as a result of all this high frequency energy, all those individuals who promote low frequency communications, pastimes, interactions with others, doing bad to others or doing derogatory things to others, suddenly wake up. They realise that what they are doing, and they stop as they wake up. And they wake up with tears in their eyes. If they have weapons, then they drop them and break them up. Those committing atrocities stop and heal those that hurt, again with tears of joy, as they realise that they're all one, they're all brothers and sisters, they're all a knowledge base rather than a belief system. Now let us leave this ball of North Korea and Middle East hang in space a moment in its high frequency existence. Let us remove this energy typhoon, this vortex, this link, this silver cord, if you want to call it that, that's gone from the inside edge of the outermost aspect of the source entity, this sphere, which is the collective area of Middle East and North Korea. And allow that vortex to move back, that typhoon to move back to the inside edge of the source, becoming back one with the source. And now we can move that sphere back down towards the earth and separate those land masses out, that is North Korea and Middle East, stroke Syria, back onto the earth, positioning them back to where they should be. But note, because they are high frequency, that although we can see the rest of the earth, there's huge gaps where these places should be, because they're much higher frequency than the base frequency of the earth. So the work that we have done will also increase the base frequency of the earth as well, through triangulation. So with the Middle East being back where it belongs, and North Korea being back where it belongs, they are also increasing the frequency of the earth as well. So with these land masses back and the work done and the high frequency aspects permeating through those land masses and also helping to raise the base frequency of the earth, we move our consciousness back from being in orbit and start to bring ourselves back into the room that we were at the start of meditation. So from the orbit condition we start to see land masses, we start to see cities, and the city that we see is that city that we exist within from the incarnate perspective. And then we move into the suburb or location where our house is, or where we are right now. Then we move more into the house that we're in, and then to the room, this white room that we collectively got together into and worked with, where we're all holding my hands, my left and right hands, with your left or right hand, to maintain the synergetic effect. And now you should disengage by letting go of my hand and move out of the door in that room, and then find yourself back into the room where you are currently holding this meditation, this synergetic and collective meditation to raise the frequencies of two areas of the earth that are in dire need of higher frequency help. So move back into the room, open your eyes, and if you've got any water there, please take a drink. With your eyes open, just for a moment, realise that the work that we did 4 weeks ago has now been augmented. What we did, and with those joining us in the same event space, has made a point, an energetic point. And as a result of that, we've seen that the amount of activity in these areas, within these areas, has in fact slowed down or subsided. So with the extra work we've done today, that level of subsidence, and level of non-engagement, and level of subsequent higher frequency interaction should decrease and then increase. Okay. So, how do you all feel after that? Matthias?
It was nice. I could actually feel the outer balloon you said, and it was very energetic. Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Chris?
I just feel a joy in myself that I'm honoured to. I just feel joyful that I'm honoured that I'm helping Gaia, helping the Earth. Happy feeling like.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we all need to make to realise actually is that we don't need to do anything physical to help. Doing what we've done today helps a lot, an awful lot. So physicality, or should I say being of service in physicality, isn't always necessary. We can do it in this way as well. So thank you for that, Chris. Marnie, how about yourself?
Yeah, I had this great, it was wonderful, and thank you for leading that. And when you were talking about when you were going through the dark to light gradation, I had this great vision of when the cities separated and out of the balloon, all the cities were connected, and this pattern that lit up the planet of white light energy across like a grid happened like wildfire, and it was raised the energies around the Earth, but in between those places too. Can't really explain it, but it was.
I've just picked up the image that you sent, which is, that's a fantastic image, and it's a fantastic image of how triangulation works. So I think.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good example. I've just picked up the whole image. It's like everything's just gone whoosh through various different grids, and yeah, absolutely amazing. So thank you for that description, Marnie. I'll remember that, because it's very, very. It's almost like how can I explain this? It's almost like the biggest fireworks show you've ever seen, and on all of the fuses from all of those fireworks back down to a single source, and that single source lights the touch paper, and all of these fuses go whoosh whoosh off, and they all wash up in their own directions to the different fireworks.
Yes, what a great description! I wish you could see my grin. It's ear to ear.
Fantastic. Okay, well that draws us to a close, and now the next one will be the 25th of May actually, which is Whitsun week for us. But we've dragged it back into the right timeline now, so we should start to see. And John will come back, of course. Joe Meebu will come back from Florida, because John Marshall's on a wedding right now. Joe Meebu's in Florida visiting his children and grandchildren, and Alan and Meryl and Xavier or Lucy, they will be with us as well, because they're on their own timeline, and hopefully Itzo will be back with us as well. Actually good. And Jane's currently visiting relatives, so she couldn't make it today as well, so we'll send her apologies. So we should have a full house next time, which is great. And that will be the 25th of May. But I'll send out the email for that, including the agenda and the meditation we're going to work through. So I'll put this out. I'm just going to finish this recording and send it out via an email and via the blog for those of us to join into. And I'd like to thank you all very, very much for spending the time and devoting the time to being of service to energetic and incarnate mankind. Thank you very, very much. Namaste to all of you.
Did you see the aliens in Crete?